Well, hello there. My name's Doug Meadows, and I'm the founder and visionary and hero maker here at David Douglas Diamonds. And I just want to welcome you to a century of legacy and luxury. And, as we go through celebrating 100 years of a family of jewelers, I don't know, I just saw on Instagram this morning, there's some people we follow in Mississippi that are building a heirloom hotel. And the very beginning of it, it just says, everyone leaves a legacy. Sometimes those legacies are great and sometimes they're not. But as I've been reflecting on my family's legacy, I realize and recognize how fragile a legacy is. Especially in a family business. To get to a fourth generation is really rare. And so I'm very blessed and thankful that we're at that point, that we're into a fourth generation here at David Douglas Diamonds. And but today, well, last week I was up in Detroit and up in Michigan as we put my aunt and uncle and my dad in their final resting places at the gravesite. And so this week has been really kind of a week of reflection on my dad and then on my dad and on my aunt and uncle. One of the next steps with my dad is to come up with a gravestone or headstone or whatever you call them. But and then what do you put on it? And so as me and my brothers reflected a little bit on my dad's life, and there was a few main key things that kind of stood out, and one of them is he laughed all the time. Another one is he never met a stranger. He always would pick up anybody on the side of the road. He'd bring strangers home to either spend the night or share a meal with. It didn't always sit well with my mom, but that was my dad. And he had a good reputation in the community. I can remember one time when I was in high school, I had, I got me a little Fiat, and the front calipers were aluminum, and I stripped out the hole in there to put the calipers on. And so I asked my dad, what do I do? And he goes, well, take it down. I got a couple guys down the street or wherever it was. He said, they'll get you all fixed up. And I said, okay. So I go down there. It's like a Saturday afternoon. And and I introduce myself. I tell these guys, I'm Doug, and Glenn's my dad, and I need some help getting this done. Can you help me? And they go, oh yeah, sure. And so they're working on it, and probably an hour goes by. They ended up drilling it out, putting a steel sleeve in there. There's a term for it. I don't know what it is, but they get it all done, and I'm sweating bullets, thinking, man, this is going to be expensive. I don't have much money. And I get all done, and I said, well, how much do I owe you guys? And they go, well, you're Glenn Meadows' son. You don't owe us nothing. And that was one of those life lessons that just really shocked me. The power of a reputation, the power of a name, and how valuable that is and how important it is to protect that. And I think that, I know that we've done the same thing in my lifetime, me and my brothers, and then now Joseph, of protecting that legacy of the Meadows family name, and making sure that we are very honest, straightforward, and because you only have one chance to protect that. Well, you have a lifetime to protect it. It only takes one time to mess it up, and so we've been very guarded of our reputation in the community and in the industry and different things. But But then we reflected back onto my aunt and uncle. My uncle Art was the youngest son, and well, really the youngest sibling and the youngest son. And I could relate to him because I was basically the baby of the family also. And so he, ever since I knew him or can remember him, he lived in Florida. He was down in Hollywood, Florida for many years, and he was a fireman. And, you know, we would take trips down there with my mom and dad, with my aunt and uncle, or with my grandma and aunt. You know, growing up, we would run down there in the summertime and go visit him. And then he had gotten married, and he married a woman that came with a stepson. He was probably about 3 years old, and I was probably 5 or 6 at the time. I just remember going to my grandma's house and kind of having a small little open house to meet her and meet Kent. Kent had a little bit of issues with the tendons in his legs, so he always walked around on his tiptoes. It was just funny to kind of watch him run around the house on his tiptoes. Thankfully, he overcame all that down the road, but me and Kent, we would get into, every time we would get together, we'd just get into a lot of mischief together. And then Art and Jan had my cousin Julie, and so when I was 10 years old, we took a trip down there with my grandma and my aunt for the birth of Julie, and so I got to be there for that. The following year, me and my brother Donnie went down there for the launch of the Apollo 11 and the landing on the moon. I know that my mom and dad took me down there several times, and I don't know, we just, a lot of fond memories. He had a big swimming pool in the backyard that was a blast to swim in. I feel like I just lived in that pool. I always remember, we'd have lunch, and then you had to wait that 1 hour before you could get back in the pool. And that just drove me nuts. That hour was an eternity. But he also had a bicycle that he had created where he offset the I don't know, the hub, the wheel, the wheel was offset so that it would wobble. I mean, it was wild. He did it on the front and the back, and he made this bike that was like a clown bike or circus bike, and I just always loved riding that bike around the neighborhood when I would go down there. And half the time the tires were flat when I got there, and I'd get them all filled up and get it all cleaned up and go riding around. But it was my first introduction to an outside door racquetball court. And as I got older and I started bringing all my buddies down there, we would go snorkeling off the reef down there, and we would come home with all kinds of stuff. I remember one time we were chasing a blowfish, and all of a sudden it just kind of stopped and it blew up. And so we took that home. We took home conch shells. We took home lobster, starfish. I mean, just all kinds of fun little things that we would take home, and then figure out how to cook or prepare them or eat them. Or we took the blowfish and we blew them up. We put a balloon inside of them, blew them up, and then painted them with shellac, and then popped the balloon. And so we had that memory of that fish. So I don't know, we did a lot of fun things. I remember one spring break, my buddy Mike calls me up. He says, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow?" And I'm like, "I don't know." He goes, "You want to go to Florida?" And I'm like, "Go to Florida?" Okay. He goes, "Everybody went down to Fort Lauderdale. Let's go." And so we bought a ticket, got on a plane. He had an aunt and uncle that lived down there, and he did border control. And so he wasn't the funnest uncles, and so I said, well, we could go to my aunt and uncle's. They're a lot more fun. And so I called up my aunt, and so we ended up crashing in on my aunt's floor and having a good time there. My aunt was probably in her late 30s at the time, and I think she enjoyed hanging with some young teenagers as we would go walk around with all the other guys and stuff. But and then my aunt was just real special too. My Aunt Jan. You know, my Uncle Art was a firefighter, and so he would work 24 hours, and then he was off for 48. So, you know, those 24 hours were spent with my Aunt Jan, and then the 48 hours were, you know, spent with my Uncle Art playing. But, you know, we would always just sit at the breakfast table in the morning and have our cup of coffee or whatever, and just chat. And you know, of the days that Uncle Art would be coming back, we'd just be waiting for him to come on in around 8 o'clock, 8:30, and figure out what we're going to do for the day. We were also cheap labor for my Uncle Art, you know, to where he wanted to put in a sprinkler system in his front yard, so we got to dig all that up for him. But you know, my Aunt Jan, you know, she taught me about Cocker Spaniels. She had a Cocker Spaniel I just fell in love with, and so me and my wife ended up buying one, and she taught us how to take care of it and different things. She taught me how to do my books for the business and different things. So just a lot of really good, fond memories of both my aunt and uncle and stuff. So I don't know. Well, one more last story of my aunt. There was one time, I don't even remember all the details to it. I just remember she burned the spaghetti dinner. And it's one of those things where you can never live it down, and you always want to get penance for it or whatever, you know, to where you could redeem yourself. So, you know, she finally cooked me a spaghetti dinner that was perfect, and I loved it. But you know, that was always our joke, was her burnt spaghetti. But you know, we had a really good time down there, and they'll definitely be missed. My aunt and uncle ended up moving from Hollywood, Florida, to Ocala, where he ended up retiring from and stuff. But I don't know. A lot of good times, good memories of both my dad, my aunt and uncle, and that was just, you know, one of the things I forgot to tell you, my Uncle Art, on his days off, he had a jewelry store. So he also stayed in the jewelry industry. And I can't remember if he called his store Work of Art or Art Jewelers. But you know, he had a nice little gig going down there between the jewelry store and being a fireman, and that was actually one of my inspirations. I can remember telling my dad at one point in time that I wanted to be a fireman, and you know, when they had the big fire in Plymouth, and my dad had to actually chip the ice off of these guys' coats just to get them off so they could get warmed up, have a cup of coffee before they went back out to try to fight that fire. You know, my dad told me, he goes, you know, that's great, but don't do it up here in Michigan. Do it somewhere where it's warm. And so I was on a journey. My goal was to be a fireman down in Florida like my uncle, and then have my jewelry business on those days off. And you know, I'm not sad that didn't work out, you know, but the main reason I couldn't be a fireman back in those days is you had to have good vision, and I had glasses, and back then they didn't allow firemen to be wearing glasses, and you had to have pretty much 20/20 vision to be a firefighter back then. And You know, that legacy actually continues because my son Peter became a fireman. I don't know I don't know if I had anything motivation to do with that, or if, you know, my uncle being a fireman had any relationship to that. I'll have to ask him next time I see him to see if what drove him to do that. But you know, so I feel like I got the best of all the worlds, and to have my son be a fireman that I desired to be. So I get to go to the station anytime I want and go play on the trucks or do whatever. But I don't know, it's been fun. So I think I'll wrap it up for this week, and next week I think I might be talking about the 60s as the family legacy continues and as this journey continues. So let me just leave you with this, that everyone leaves a legacy, and make it a good one. And so until then, goodbye.